You felt it first, didn't you? That ripple beneath the warp, that single vibration that didn't belong to your chaos. You thought it was another psyker lost in madness, another fool begging for deliverance. But it wasn't madness that moved. It was memory. You reached for it, stretching your tendrils of corruption through the sea of souls, and for the first time in 10,000 years. The warp hesitated. You called it impossible. You, who have consumed suns, enslaved saints, and silenced the cries of entire species. You who believed that nothing remained outside your reach. But something walked through your storm, calm, unyielding, and blinding. He did not pray to the Emperor. He did not curse your gods. He did not even speak your name. He simply drew his blade, and the warp itself drew back. You laughed at first. The laughter of those who cannot feel fear because they've forgotten what it means to lose. But when your demons screamed, not in pain but in recognition, you remembered. You remembered the old wars before the Horus heresy, before mankind, when light and darkness still understood consequence. You remembered what it meant when something pure entered your realm. He was not of Terra. He was not of any world touched by the Astronomicon. He came from beyond, pulled through the skin of reality by the Emperor's dying dream, or perhaps by your own arrogance. You made a hole in existence, and through it stepped the one thing you cannot corrupt. A soul without a price, a weapon without a master. You thought this was your dominion, but it isn't. It never was. He doesn't speak your tongue. He doesn't need to. When his blade sings, the warp listens. And when the light burns through your abyss, every demon knows what you refuse to admit. You have met something older than fear. You will call him many names before this is over. Invader, anomaly, heretic. But the galaxy will remember him by only one, Ichigo. And you will remember what it means to be afraid. You were watching Terra when it happened, not with eyes, not with any sight that belongs to bone or blood, but with that endless gaze of yours that sees through lies, through prayers, through planets. You were waiting, not for the soul of man to rise, but for it to fail. You have waited 10,000 years to feast on that final moment when the cradle of humanity forgets why it fights. But what you saw that day wasn't failure. It was fracture, not a rupture in the immaterium, not one of your glorious rotting holes in the veil. This was different. You felt it like a muscle tearing deep inside your own madness. A seam opening in the wrong place, not torn by a ritual, not split by a sacrifice, just undone. Quietly, unexplained, you reached for it, sent whispers and beasts and the memories of dead gods into the crack, and they didn't come back. You tried to name it. You searched your archives of forbidden echoes, and all you found was silence, the kind of silence you despise. Not ignorance, but denial. As if the galaxy itself refused to acknowledge what now stood inside it. But you felt it, didn't you? The pulse, the pressure, the soul print that didn't belong. He arrived with no thunder, no banners, no prophecy, no golden light, just a presence. Like gravity where there was none before, his feet touched the dust of holy Terra, and the wind didn't rise, it fled. You tried to see him then, really see him. But your vision blurred not by some warp field, not by any aegis you could name, but by the fact that he simply didn't belong to you. You called it impossible. You ordered reality to correct itself, but reality had already bent to him. The rift shimmered behind him, rippling like water touched by a sword. There was no craft, no teleportation, no warp trace you could follow. Just a clean cut, as if someone had sliced a line between worlds and walked through it like it was a curtain. And the moment he arrived, the immaterium shrank. You won't admit it, but even your demons stopped. They didn't charge, they didn't scream, they trembled. As if a name they didn't remember had been whispered back into their minds, and it carried the weight of death. You searched your prophecies, you scoured your dreams. The gods, your gods, offered you nothing. Corn bled in silence. Sench rewrote entire timelines to hide the fracture. Even Slanesh turned away, its endless hungers dulled by a scent it couldn't taste. And Papa Nurgle, he smiled, but not the smile of rot, the smile of remembrance, because he had seen this kind of soul before. You tried to intervene. You sent your lesser beasts first, warp flies, thought leeches, a dream of teeth bound in hope. You whispered into the hearts of psychers across the segmentum, hoping someone, anyone, could bleed on your behalf and open a proper gate. But the black ships saw nothing. The astropaths heard only static. And the Custodians, they didn't move, because they were already watching. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't explain. He walked through the ruins of memory across bones too ancient for the administratum to classify. His clothing was not armor. His blade had no machine spirit. His eyes didn't glow. But every step he took made your realm shudder. You thought you could claim him. You always think that. Every soul is a door to you. Every heart a hinge. You tried to tempt him, didn't you? Showed him visions of loss. Pulled on the edges of his pain. Offered him the throne of earth, the silence of the golden throne, the seat of a dead father. You even whispered in his voice. He didn't answer. Not once. But you felt the refusal. Not in words, in will. Because he is not yours to corrupt, and never was. He came from beyond your reach, not summoned by the Emperor, not crafted in a vault or a tank, not sanctioned, not known. He came because someone, somewhere, cut the sky open, and he was standing on the other side, blade already drawn. That blade. You've never felt anything like it, not steel, not force, purpose. It doesn't hum. It reminds. Every demon who's ever fed on faith now dreams of that edge. Not because it ends them, but because it ends their relevance. He doesn't fight like the Astartes. He doesn't chant like the sisters. He doesn't even try. He moves. And your creatures forget how to scream. And you? You stand in the rift still, reaching with fingers made of thought and entropy, trying to rewrite what is unfolding. But you are already too late. He has stepped onto Terra. He has looked upon the sky, and your name means nothing to him. You expected resistance. That much you were prepared for. You've survived the fire of the Black Templars, the iron grip of the Grey Knights, the silence of the Sisters Repentia. You've been exorcised 1,000 ways, scattered by bolters, banished by faith. You always return. You always find a crack. You always find a soul that wavers just enough to let you in. But this time no one answered you. Not even the black ships. You sent your call across the warp, a whisper that carries like smoke through minds already frayed. You reached for every untethered psyker adrift in the black, every hollowed soul trembling in the cargo holds of the Imperium's shadow fleets. You expected at least one scream, one fracture, one obedient lapse in sanity to open the way. But the black ships were silent, not because they didn't hear you, because they heard him first. You don't understand silence like that. Yours is the quiet of suffocation, of despair pressing down until even thought rots. But this silence, this was different. This was resistance without effort, the kind of silence that wraps around a storm and tells it, no further. The choir aboard the Nullwind-class vessel Dominatus received the disturbance first, not as warp static, not as a surge, but as the total absence of signal. Like a void had opened not in space but in meaning itself. Their eyes wept blood not from strain, but from recognition. One fell to his knees and chanted a name not in low Gothic, not in high, but in something older. A tongue that hadn't been spoken since before the heresy, locked in the subroutines of long forbidden lexicons. The vessel's confessor tried to record it. His data slate exploded. You panicked, didn't you? You who have watched entire sectors fall to madness, who sculpt madness into cities and call it beauty. You trembled. You tried to override. You screamed into the minds of navigators, lashing them with chaos runes and false visions. But their third eyes blinked closed as one, not out of fear, out of respect, because the Astronomicon put them pulsed. You hadn't seen that in centuries. That sacred dying light flickered, not dimmer, not disrupted, but struck, as if something touched the very center of the Emperor's beacon. Not to extinguish it, not to replace it, to acknowledge it. You didn't understand it, so you blamed it. You called it anomaly. Interference, a random crossing of psychic filth from some lost warp-born anomaly. But anomalies don't carry names, and this one did. You heard it again, didn't you? Spoken in the minds of psychers moments before their skulls caved in under its pressure. Written in blood on the bulkheads of ships whose Geller fields failed for less than a second. Scrawled by the dead fingers of a planetary governor who had never heard the word before and still carved it into the walls of his bedchamber before he choked to death on light. Ichigo, you tried to seal the name, tried to brand it as demonic. You ordered the Ordo Malleus to rewrite protocols. You whispered to their agents that this was another lie from the great enemy, a false god made of anime-shaped heresy. Another cursed xenoconstruct unfit for cataloging. But nothing obeyed, not even your loyal corrupted ones. Because Ichigo didn't ask to be understood. He didn't seek recognition, he just kept moving. Every step he took echoed across warp space, not as threat, but as correction. Your realm, once infinite, now twitches in discomfort. Places you've ruled since before mankind lit its first Prometheum torch, have begun to twist away from you, not toward another god, but toward balance. You hate that word because you understand dominance, consumption, submission. But balance doesn't bow. It doesn't beg. Balance simply is. He doesn't use the warp like your champions do, doesn't twist it, doesn't rely on it. His blade does not channel demonic flame. His strength isn't born from sacrifice or incantation. It just is. That makes him more dangerous than any Primarch you ever corrupted. Because he doesn't try to defeat you. He simply denies you. And in that denial, something old reawakens. In the deeper cells of the Imperial Palace, within the null vault sealed since the Scouring, a servitor powered only by ancient dream code begins to hum. Its eyes glow blue, not like the fires of psyker rage, but like the sky before it breaks. It plays one phrase on repeat, not scripture, not warning, just an entry. External agent, non-warp signature, threat level untouchable ++. You recognize the designation, but it was never meant to be real. It was theoretical, a failsafe for something that could never happen. A being that the warp itself would refuse, and now he walks the surface of your long-awaited prize. Terra, not cloaked in Emperor's light, not backed by the Astartes, not written in prophecy, but still inevitable. You still try to deny it, of course. You're nothing if not persistent. You send more through the cracks, new things, old things, remnants of forgotten wars wrapped in teeth and screaming chrome. But they don't return. They don't even die. They vanish, and your realm shudders, because the black ships saw nothing, but he saw you. And now? You wish they had stopped him. You've seen a million blades, chainzords crackling with Prometheum-fed madness, demon blades whispering with every heartbeat they consume. You've seen the relics of the Horus heresy, blades etched in sorrow, sanctified in holy data scrolls, named by dying Primarchs in the final breath of loyalty. You've even kissed the edge of the God Emperor's sword once, long ago, back when you still believed pain was something you could outrun, but this blade, You don't know its name. You can't feel its spirit. It does not cry for war. It does not scream with vengeance. It hums, low and steady, like a warning meant for the bones, not the ears, a resonance not powered by hatred or blessed machine oil, but something older than both. When he draws it, the air doesn't break. It remembers. You tried to touch it, didn't you? To analyze the waveform, to taste the signature of his slash. Your demons reached for the residual cut in reality he left behind, hoping to leech from it, trace its source, mimic it even in some cursed echo. But the scar refused to bleed, because the wound wasn't psychic. It wasn't material. It was spiritual. His sword did not cleave the flesh of your world. It severed your claim to it. And now it moves again. He walks through the crumbled architecture of Terra's outer ruins, untouched by scavengers, untroubled by the fear that coils in the vox grills of every structure. The atmosphere does not resist him. The ancient stone of the Imperium does not challenge his steps. Because the planet, like the soul, knows what walks upon it. You throw distractions at him. Not warriors. Distractions. Visual ghosts. Echoes of memories that don't belong to him. You fabricate a dream. His friends crying out, his home planet disintegrating, false guilt fed to break something you cannot name. But the blade sings once, and your illusions burst like smoke before flame. Not because the illusions were weak, but because he does not listen to lies. He doesn't even dignify them. He is not here to debate with you. He is here to end you. You still don't believe it, not fully. You convince yourself he's a fluke, a psionic artifact from another dimension, a rogue weapon that bled through a reality fold. You tell yourself that no blade not forged by man or warp could strike like that, could command like that. But your creatures know. Your war fiends who watched Sanguinius die, they see him and back away. Your thought rippers who tore through the minds of unshielded Astartes, they won't go near him. Your minor gods, the petty warp-born princes who laugh at the Imperium's faith, they whisper behind your back, because when he draws that blade, he doesn't offer threat. He offers finality. The Custodians watched it happen. You saw it through their golden helms. The slightest twitch when he moved, the shifting of their stances, not in defense, but in calibration. Their bodies remembered what their training forbade them to believe, that something greater than what they served had just entered the field. He did not acknowledge them. He didn't need to. His blade, Zangetsu, hummed not with circuitry or artificial psychic arrays, but with purpose. Singular, undistracted, absolute. You understand now, don't you? He isn't drawing power from this realm, he's interrupting it. Where your influence grows like mold, feeding on cracks in sanity, his blade carves not through bodies, but through conditions. Tzinch's laughter stilled when the blade touched the wind. Korn's rage boiled uselessly at the edge of his aura. Slanesh twisted in agony, unable to comprehend the purity of intention behind every strike. And Nurgle? He simply wept, not from sorrow, but from recognition. Because this isn't the first time someone has walked into a realm they don't belong to, carrying nothing but defiance. You thought only the Emperor had that power. You were wrong. Ichigo carries no legion. He holds no title. He wears no sigil of allegiance, and still, Terra accepts him. No, not just Terra. The warp itself. The warp shudders because it understands something you forgot. That there are truths deeper than belief. And his blade, it sings with that truth. Not prophecy, not power. Clarity, you keep sending more. Each one is more desperate, flesh beasts who can mimic the voices of loved ones. Warp-born assassins who move between synaptic gaps. Architects of despair who turn hope into ash with a glance. None of them matter. The blade moves, they cease. And for each strike he delivers, your realm dim, not by fire, not by light, but by doubt. Because you, the eternal force of distortion, are now facing something unbending. Not angry, not heroic, just exact. You begin to understand what the Custodians saw. Not threat, not heresy, just a mirror, because he doesn't march into your world. He reflects what you can never be. Clean. You counted on them, not to protect you. You've never needed protection, but to protect the order you manipulate, the old balance, the ceremonial grid of control wrapped around Terra like iron lace. The Custodians, golden sentinels of the throne, born not of faith but of calculation, were your greatest firewall. They didn't believe in gods. They believed in function. And yet, they hesitated. You watched them from the shadowed spine of the warp as he crossed the perimeter of the palace. No alarms blared, no weapons activated, no challenge protocols were engaged. You expected the halberds to rise. You expected the formation to shift, the eternal vigilance to respond as it always had. But instead, they watched. You don't understand hesitation like that. You think of it as weakness, as corruption. But theirs wasn't fear, it was recognition. He didn't speak to them, he didn't bow, he didn't look their way, and yet every custodian on duty that cycle logged a memory spike, an inexplicable pull in their biorhythm sensors, a resonance that neither the Emperor's tarot nor the data vaults could interpret. Their gene seed did not flare with threat, their minds did not scream with resistance. They just listened. To what? To nothing. To the stillness around him. To the way his presence rearranged space, not like a psyker's pressure, not like a warp field or null aura. Something else, something prior. You told yourself it was a psychic illusion, a veil, some foreign technology interfering with their perception. But even the machine's spirits didn't resist him. In the shadow of the Eternity Gate, where sensor fields overlap and anti-heresy algorithms loop 10 trillion times a second, every cogitator stilled, not crashed, not corrupted, stilled, as if they chose to go quiet. One custodian stepped forward, not in challenge, but in assessment. His movements were perfect. Centuries of ritual flowed through his breath like hymns carved into gold. He measured the figure before him with the same focus he once gave to demon princes and war masters, but this time, there was no tension. He didn't raise his weapon. He spoke only 3 words. State your purpose. Ichigo said nothing, but the sword on his back pulsed once. You felt it. So did the custodian. And in that instant, without words, purpose was understood. The warrior of Terra stepped aside. You screamed through the warp, clawing at the membranes of thought, trying to awaken the old fail-safes. The Emperor's laws were clear. No unknown soul may cross the gate unscanned, unsanctioned, unblessed. But they let him walk, because something in their core programming, the part written not in data but in design, whispered that this was not a violation. It was a return. You spat lies into their ears, whispered of demons in disguise, of chaos mimics who wear the skins of saviors. You filled their vox feeds with memories of the Horus heresy, the battles where trust was fatal. You invoked the name of Lorgar, of Alfarius. Still they watched. Still they did not move. Because they were built to serve truth, and he stood there, silent and steady without ever needing to prove it. You watched as one custodian touched the hilt of his weapon, not to draw it, but to honor it, as if sensing something older than command. Do you understand now? He didn't win them over. He didn't need to. They recognized him the way a locked blade recognizes the hand it was forged for. Not by sight, by resonance, because Terra has seen every kind of invader. But it has only ever welcomed a few, and this wasn't welcome. It was inevitability. You tried one final push. You whispered to the genetic memory inside the Custodians, showed them the fall of the galaxy, the burning of Prospero, the failure of trust, but it didn't matter, because they saw what you couldn't, that this man, this soul, didn't come to kneel. He came to guard, not the throne, the space around it. He didn't ask to enter, he simply stood there, and the silence felt defended. That's when you felt it, isn't it? That pull in the warp. Not rejection, shame. Because even your demons paused. Even your twisted echoes of Primarchs tilted their heads. Because for the first time in an age, they didn't know whether to attack or to kneel. You don't hear the throne. You never could. That place where humanity pretends its dying god still breathes was built to keep you out. Wards carved in the blood of forgotten saints, null fields layered in oceans of agony. Faith crystallized into technology so severe it no longer knows the difference between machine and miracle. The Golden Throne has no voice in the warp, but it echoed. And you felt it. It wasn't sound, it wasn't light, it wasn't psychic. It was resonance. A harmonic ripple that traveled backward through the tides of unreality and struck you behind your own teeth. You staggered. You who made the warp your cradle. You who bent souls like metal in a forge. You who fed on the fear of dying worlds. You stumbled. Because something moved inside the throne. You told yourself it was a false signal. A flare from some dying astropath or a malfunction in the pulse of the Astronomicon. You blamed it on solar pressure, on Geller field interference, on some forgotten scrap code artifact that echoed at the wrong frequency. But none of your explanations held, because it wasn't random. It was recognition. You tried to reach inside, past the null, past the veil. You extended your senses across a million screaming demons, across the broken back of the galaxy, into the heart of Terra itself. But you couldn't see it, because what stirred there wasn't part of the warp. It was deeper. And when Ichigo stood outside the chamber, not demanding entrance, not breaking the gate, just being, the echo happened again, this time stronger. You recoiled. You, the accuser of saints, the corrupter of lines unbroken since the dawn of fire, you recoiled. Because what answered him wasn't the Emperor. It was the silence around the Emperor. That same silence that watches while gods die. That judges not with fire, but with stillness. That cannot be bargained with, nor corrupted, nor chained. You don't understand silence like that. You speak in screams, in lies, in seduction. Your dominion is made of noise. But Ichigo didn't bring noise. He brought balance. His presence did not burn the chamber. It didn't break the laws of Terra's sanctity, but the walls remembered him. The stone beneath his feet, forged before you ever knew the word mortal, shifted as if a lost frequency had returned. Custodians did not speak. Tech priests did not catalog. The Voxnet remained offline. But the data slates in the Hall of Golden Veins flashed in sync. All of them. A heartbeat. Not human. Not divine. Just true. You tore at it then. You screamed at the warp, forced open every soul still branded with your whispers, flung demons like fire through every inch of unreality you could twist, and none of it mattered. Because inside the throne, there was no room for your corruption. Not now. Not while he stood there. You tried to speak to him again, through memory, through illusion. You showed him the destruction of his own world. You built hallucinations where his blade shattered, where his spirit broke. You offered him thrones of blood, towers of praise. You gave him the dream every warrior eventually falls to matter forever. He ignored it. He wasn't there to be remembered. He was there to watch, not to guard the Emperor, but to remind the galaxy what it should be afraid of. Because when the echo rang out the third time, something changed in the warp. A wall you didn't know existed shivered. And far away, in the eye of terror, a demon prince fell to his knees, howling a name he'd never spoken. Not because of pain, but because he recognized the signature. You still won't admit it. Even now, as the echo fades and the golden light dims again, you call it anomaly, a fracture, a bleed-through of dimensions better left unnamed. But you feel the pressure in your temples, you taste the copper on your tongue. Because that echo wasn't just recognition, it was acknowledgment. The throne answered, not with fire, not with decree, but with presence. And you, who name yourself God, you were not included. You always wanted it to end this way, the skies of Terra burning, the marble towers cracked and swallowed by shadow, the screams of billions muffled beneath the laughter of the warp. You have waited since the first imperial prayer was uttered to see it answered in ash, and when the moment finally came, you rejoiced. For just a second. For you thought this was your hour. You thought the great game had finally tilted in your favor. The warp tore open above Terra like a wound that couldn't close, not coaxed, not summoned, it forced itself through. Not subtle, not clever, a brute rupture bleeding demons into the atmosphere. You sent them all. You had no reason to hold back anymore. The gate was open, the throne was flickering, and you believed you were finally unopposed. They fell like red rain, brass-helmed berserkers of corn screaming blood oaths in tongues forgotten by mortal time. Tzeentch's nightmares stitched into living warp tapestries, unraveling reason with every gesture. Slaanesh spilled music across the sky, twisted notes that made children tear their own ears off to stop the sound, and Nurgle, sweet, rotting Nurgle, poured his beloved across Terra's white temples like a slow, laughing flood. You were triumphant. You laughed as the surface cracked beneath your weight. You thought nothing could stand now. You even whispered your victory into the minds of those who dared still preach. And then, he moved. He didn't rise from the golden throne. He didn't descend from orbit on wings of fire. He was already standing there, exactly where he'd been when the first tier opened. His cloak shifted slightly in the wind born from your rupture. His hand rose to the hilt of his blade. No war cry, no litany, just a breath. And then the skies screamed. You never understood air like that, air that remembers being clean. When his blade left its sheath, the warp flinched. The demons paused mid-charge, not because of some holy radiance, but because they felt something older than fear, something even your gods can't name, a wound in the world that doesn't bleed, it silences. Ichigo didn't strike like a soldier. He moved like truth. One step forward and a greater demon of Slaanesh unraveled in mid-laugh, its form collapsing into petals that ignited without flame. Another step, and a brass hound of corn, a beast bred from unending rage, leapt to tear out his throat, only for its jaws to close on nothing, not empty space. Judgment. You tried to shout over it. You filled the air with contradiction. Hex runes binding words, forgotten syllables meant to confuse even the sturdiest psychic anchor. But he did not falter, because your words are lies, and his blade only cuts lies. He wasn't there to win a war. He was there to end a condition. One demon prince, bloated and crowned, riding a chariot pulled by shrieking mortal husks, tried to mark him. It threw sigils of claim across the battlefield, screeching declarations of ownership. But Ichigo didn't even look. The blade moved once, and the air bent around it like water around stone. The chariot was gone, not destroyed, erased. You had seen gods rise. You had seen Primarchs fall. You had swallowed fragments of the Emperor's dream and spit them back as corruption. But you had never seen the warp try to retreat. The marble beneath the palace cracked, not from his weight, from the pressure of your beasts backing away. They didn't know why. They only knew they couldn't breathe near him, couldn't sustain form, couldn't remember their own names. Because he didn't fight them. He refused to let them exist. A myrmidon of Nurgle, bloated, laughing, immune to pain, reached out to touch him, perhaps to understand, perhaps to infect. But when its fingers came close, they stopped, not by force, but as if the very molecules of corruption had become ashamed of themselves. And that's when it happened. Not a shout, not a spell, just a look. Ichigo turned his eyes toward the rift, and the sky cracked. The demons still standing wailed, clawing at their own flesh as if trying to dig away the part of themselves that had seen it. The warp screamed not with rage but with confusion. The laws you had crafted inside unreality and your own scriptures began to unravel. Not because he destroyed them, but because his presence made them irrelevant. You didn't understand it. You still don't. You have faced saints, martyrs, and legends. You have corrupted the uncorruptible. You even pierced the Emperor's own choir. But you never accounted for a soul that couldn't be catalogued. Because Ichigo doesn't wield power like a weapon. He is the weapon. And the sky, your domain, your triumph, broke like stained glass under a single drop of silence. Blood rained, not his, never his, but yours. You've heard every name the galaxy could offer. You've rewritten them, twisted them, taken sons and daughters of noble worlds and carved their names into curses. You made the name of Horus a poison, turned Lorgar's voice into a sermon of rot. You buried Sanguinius beneath stained myth and dragged Vulcan through pits that never cooled. You are the archivist of failure, the scribe of betrayal. You collect names not to honor them, but to ruin them. But this one, you can't hold it. You tried. You shaped it in mimicry. You screamed it through demon lungs. You carved it into your war-torn sky like graffiti written in plasma fire. You even tried to gift it a prophecy, hoping to trap it in your cycle of rise and corruption. But every time you spoke it, your voice fractured. Because it isn't yours. You do not own it. You do not define it. You cannot place it among the rest. Because this name does not exist to be worshipped. It does not shine. It does not bleed. It does not beg. It refuses. Ichigo. Even now, as you form the syllables, they turn to smoke in your throat, not because they are forbidden, but because they are incompatible. The warp knows this name, not as an enemy, not as a savior, but as something that should not be, because it doesn't follow your pattern, not born of the Immaterium, not spawned in the warp, not a fragment, clone, or rebirth, a visitor, a consequence. He does not crave glory. His victories are not declarations. His every motion erases context, unspools your centuries of lore, unstitches your labyrinth of meanings. And when your demons cry out, when your corrupted champions ask what he is, you have no answer. Only a name. The last name ever spoken by those who look upon him, not in reverence, in finality. It happened first on Malkador's threshold, a herald of Slanesh. Wings of glass and a voice like stolen lullabies reached the inner walls of the Librarium Sanctus. It danced past 200 Scaterii, singing lullabies in binary inversion. It reached the seal. It opened its mouth to curse the Emperor's name. But what came out was his, Ichigo. It collapsed, bled from the eyes, died smiling, but not in victory. In recognition. Then came the brass apostle, Khorne's chosen vessel, rage incarnate, a tower of burning metal that had once been an imperial reaver titan. It shattered through Terra's outer crust. It screamed for the blood of saints. But the moment it faced him, it forgot its own name. It didn't fall to blade. It knelt, as if caught in a memory it couldn't explain. It mumbled something before its throat closed on molten air. Ichigo, that was all. You can't even bury it. Every attempt to overwrite the records fails. Your scrap code falters. Your corruption scripts erase everything except that syllable. It stands untouched in Vox recordings, imprinted in the dreams of those who've never heard it. The name echoes in Blackstone, in Warpstone, in you. You are the unholy archive of names lost to horror and time, and yet this one marks you, because it isn't a name carried by legend. It is a name that cancels legend. You tried to speak over it. You declared your own titles louder. You sent avatars across space to declare dominion over Terra. But every time they opened their mouths, his was the name they spoke. Ichigo. No title, no house, no bloodline. Just a word. Unchained from expectation, free from alignment, your gods demanded explanation. You offered none. Because even they felt it. That friction in reality when his name is uttered. It doesn't summon, it grounds. It does not break the warp. It reminds it what truth tastes like. And that taste is ash on your tongue, or so. You who branded Sanguinius as martyr, Horus as monster, Gilliman as false regent, you who named the Primarchs for the roles you assigned them, you cannot place him. Because he refuses to sit on your board. He flips it. So now, as you tremble in a warp that bends away from Terra, as your whispers choke on their own echoes, you are left with one thought. This is what it feels like to speak a name that was never yours to shape. This is what it feels like to lose language. You once believed they were infinite. The gods of the warp, your gods, Horn, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh, titans made of desire and ruin, fire and silence, lies and laughter. You didn't just follow them, you were them. Their will in motion, their whisper in every heretic's last breath. And they answered you, always with power, with plague, with prophecy, with teeth. But now they don't answer at all. You called to them the moment he stepped through the rift. You offered names, offered blood, offered planets. You carved ancient prayers into fresh cadavers and burned them in void space, calling out in the high speech of demons and dead stars. You gave them everything, and they gave you silence. At first you thought it was withdrawal, strategic reserve, that they were simply waiting to see what he was. Perhaps they wished to watch. Study, learn. But now you know. Now you feel it. They are not watching. They are hiding. You've never seen that before. Not from them. Not from the ones who devoured Eldar souls like fruit. Not from the ones who hijacked Astarte's genetics and spat them back as mockery. Not from the monsters who turned Titan's moon into a graveyard of dreams. But now, the gods you serve refuse even to whisper his name. Because they know something you couldn't. He doesn't believe in them. He doesn't need to. And without belief, they shrink. He didn't deny them with sermons. He didn't defile their icons. He didn't make some grand declaration of heresy. He just didn't notice them. You don't understand what that does to a god. To be looked at and seen as irrelevant. To be bypassed like noise. The warp is not built for that. It howls for attention, for obsession. It demands to be feared, hated, adored. But Ichigo gave it nothing. And so the gods turned away. Not because they were insulted, because they were afraid. Tzeentch, whose every feather is a plan unfolding, whose every whisper is a galaxy's undoing, tried to rewrite the battlefield, tried to loop time, tried to make the moment not happen, but it did because you can't outthink something that doesn't play your game. Khorne sent avatars born of apocalyptic rage, beings that bled before they existed. They leapt toward him roaring his doom, but rage only matters if it's recognized. And he never even looked at them. They fell like smoke beneath the edge of his will. Slaanesh sculpted dreams of temptation so refined they could seduce planets. Tried to show him pleasure beyond flesh, beyond ego, beyond salvation. He passed through them like mist, not because he resisted, but because he wasn't interested. You can't corrupt someone who has no want. And Nurgle, oh Nurgle, grandfather rot, maker of decay, lord of joyful infection. He looked upon Ichigo and wept, not from sadness, from remembrance, because somewhere deep inside the bloated corpse heart of that ruined god there was a flicker of recognition, a memory of something before all of this, before chaos, before the Emperor, before you. And for a moment he saw not a soul to corrupt, but a soul that could never be touched. You tried to demand an audience, tried to climb the psychic staircase to their realms and shout, but the doors were closed. Not barred, gone. Because the gods are not silent, they are absent. You have never been alone. You've always had them, But now, with him on Terra, you are, and worse than that, you realize something that curdles even your immortal essence. They're not hiding from him. They're hiding from what they used to be. Because he doesn't just challenge their power. He reminds them of what they once were before belief twisted them into monsters. And gods cannot survive reflection. So now, when you pray, when you scream, when you offer the burning of 1 billion innocents in exchange for one whispered blessing, nothing answers. Because in a galaxy ruled by gods of madness and war, a single being walking in silence is the only thing they fear. You've spent millennia trying to make him speak, the one on the golden throne, the hollow god, the false emperor, the last barrier between you and unchallenged dominion. You've called him by 1,000 names, each more bitter than the last. You mocked his silence. You praised it. You cursed it. You begged for it to break, because in that silence you imagined weakness. But now you understand. He never spoke because he never had to. You tried to provoke him with heresy, with betrayal, with the screams of his sons. You let Horus die by his hand. You let the galaxy drown in blood and fire. And still he said nothing. You thought it was pride. You thought it was the last refusal of a dying god, nailed to a throne of guilt. But then Ichigo came, and the silence shifted, not shattered, not spoken, but shaped, like wind that curves around stone. When Ichigo stood before the throne, he didn't kneel, he didn't demand, he didn't pray, he waited. And the throne responded, not with light, not with miracles, but with presence. The golden sarcophagus that holds the last breath of mankind did not open, it did not glow, it simply acknowledged. A pulse, not physical, not warp, but something beneath both. A stillness that curled inward, not retreat, not fear, recognition. You couldn't believe it at first. How could something so foreign, so unregistered, so unfiled in the countless logs of imperial faith be met with recognition? You clawed through data vaults trying to find protocol for such a thing. There was none, no record, no liturgy for this. Because this wasn't faith, it was truth. Ichigo didn't touch the throne. He didn't cross the warded line. He stood just at the edge, the line every custodian would kill to defend, and the line every psyker dies to approach, and nothing stopped him. Because nothing needed to. He wasn't there to challenge. He wasn't even there to serve. He was there to be seen. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor saw. You felt it in the warp, a tremor, not of power, of connection. The kind that doesn't need words. You tried to scream into the silence, tried to tear it open with entropy. You conjured visions, demons, 1,000 false emperors to intercept what was unfolding. But the real one, the one in that chair, was already listening. To him. Not because he was a warrior, not because he was a weapon, but because he was still. And in that stillness, the Emperor finally had something he could share. Not order, not command, just understanding. You didn't see it happen, but the Custodians felt it. Their armor plates flexed without command. Their hearts skipped, not in fear, but in awe. For the throne, long silent, long patient, long bound to duty beyond thought, pulsed. Not a voice, a presence, and in that presence, Ichigo stepped back, not dismissed, not rejected, but complete. He turned, not with ceremony, not with pride, just peace, because he wasn't there to receive anything. He was there to return something. You don't understand what he returned, you may never, but something once stolen, something broken in the age of gods and monsters had finally come home. And still the Emperor did not speak, because now he didn't have to. You've survived everything. The scouring, the long war, the Black Crusades, the countless failures and victories stacked upon each other like bones beneath a dying sun. You who wear entropy as armor. You who shape destiny through decay. You know what it means to endure, but now you learn what it means to bend, not break, because you can't break. Not yet, not completely. But as Ichigo walked from the throne, across marble scorched by your fury and prayers long since dried into the stone, you bent, not just the warp, you. The fabric of unreality shrieked at his presence. He didn't banish it, he didn't fight it, he simply moved through it, and in doing so, he altered its rhythm. The tides of madness that once surged freely across Terra's skies were pulled away from him like water drawn from rot. And you hate it, because he doesn't destroy. He restores, not with healing hands, not with benevolence, but with truth. Every footstep he took whispered one idea into the bones of reality, into the warp, into the immaterium, into every ruined syllable of your long deception. You were never inevitable. That was always your greatest lie, wasn't it? That chaos is the true state of things, that everything decays, that everything fails, that even gods fall, and thus only you remain. But Ichigo is not order, he is not hope, he is not light, he is balance. And balance remembers, even as the warp bends away from him, you still exist. You cling to the shadows that flee in his wake. You drip into forgotten cracks. You are not undone, not yet, because he did not come to end you. He came to remind you that you can be ended. You scream through the last cracks in the veil, searching for your gods. They do not answer. You search for your avatars. They are gone. You reach for the demons. They flicker like old flames dying in sudden wind. He doesn't hunt them. He simply removes the reason they remain, because the warp is not evil. It's reaction. And you, the corruption that twisted it into a kingdom of screaming prophecy and bloodied ecstasy. You have been seen, not just by him, but by the throne, by Terra, by the galaxy. And now? Now you're remembered for what you really are. Not a god, not a fate, not an answer. Just a shadow cast by a world too long without light. Ichigo didn't stay, he didn't build a shrine, didn't raise a banner, didn't offer wisdom, he simply walked into silence. And that silence, your silence, remains because the warp will recover. It always does. It heals through pain, through twisting, through swallowing its own rot to birth something worse. But now it remembers him, a frequency it cannot mimic, a cut it cannot infect, a name it cannot change. You will rise again. Of course you will. You are stubborn, you are patient, you are everything wrong that still refuses to die, but so long as even one echo of him remains. A thought, a vibration, a breath. You will never be complete again, because now the warp bends, because now he exists, because now, forever in your bloodstream of lies, the truth walks silently, and its name is Ichigo. Is.